Welcome to the Cat Power Podcast, where we deliver powerful insights into the world of Caterpillar Oil and Gas, showcasing the latest in technological advancements and highlighting the stories of the industry's most dynamic leaders. I'm your host, Sergio Tejeda. Now let's get ready to power up with the Cat Power Podcast. And welcome again to the Cat Power Podcast. My name is Sergio Tejeda. I'm your host. And today we have a very special guest because we're celebrating the 30-year anniversary of the G3600 engines. We have Mr. Al Hunt. And so Al is a retired Cat dealer technician who invested and dedicated 45 years of his life to helping customers succeed using Cat engines. And today we're reminiscing with Al about his time with the G3600 engines. During his time with the Cat dealers, he helped commission over 300 G3600 engines and is still regarded as the world-renowned expert in this line of engines. And he retired in 2009 officially, but he continues to share his expertise with both Cat and gas compression operations nationwide. So coming to us from Irving, Texas, Mr. Al Hunt, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hi, Sergio. How you doing?
Doing great, doing great. It's so great to have you here on the show.
Thank you.
So let's get started here. Let's take it back to the beginning. You started off, a number of years ago. Tell me what that was like as you were growing up, and what was your first gig with the Cat dealers and your introduction to the Cat world. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, my dad worked for Louisiana Machinery back in the 50s, and my first encounter, I guess, I worked around the house and did some spare jobs and whatever, and he was going to have to take off. My mother was going to have surgery, and times were different back then. And he made a deal with the service manager because he didn't want to lose his overtime. He asked, could I work in his place for 2 days while he took off with my mother in surgery. And so that deal was struck. So I worked 2 days in my dad's place so he'd keep his overtime. And then the next Monday I went to work on my own. And I always kidded him. I said,
So wait, how old were you at that time?
Oh, I was still in high school.
Okay.
Probably 10th or 11th grade.
Nice.
But I always kidded him. I said, I don't think you ever paid me for those 2 days I worked in your stead. He says, and you know what?
I'm not going to.
Not going to. But we laugh about that a lot.
Checks in the mail.
But that was my first deal with Louisiana Machinery, and I worked for them during the summer, and then I worked for them for several years before I came out to Texas and worked for DAR.
Wow. And so when was the first time that you got introduced to the G3600 when you first saw that? Tell me about what that was like.
Well, we made a trip, knew it was coming, but we made a trip up to Mossville, and they didn't have any gas engine running, but it went up to the tech center and they had a diesel 3612 running. And I had not been around one at all. And they had this one running, and we walked in the test cell, and it was an awesome feeling because you could just stand on the concrete, which is pretty stable in a test cell, and you could feel the engine vibrations coming up through your feet, along with the other emanations of noise and power.
Sure.
One thing I've learned with the 3600 that sound is a very powerful force. I've always liked to commission the first 3600, but it was always tough to commission others while the ones that on site were running. Being around and running engines all day long will really buffet your body and make you tired. That sound really does physically work on your body.
And so when that first came out and you you commissioned the first one, You brought it to the customer site. What was that like? What was their reaction like?
Well, they were kind of surprised. You know, it's big, and we never had a product that big. The G399 was the largest gas engine we had, largest engine we had total. But they were all uh, really surprised. Walk around, what's this and what's that, and all wanted to learn about it and hear it run.
And so when you know when they brought it out, obviously when a new product comes out, there's usually some skepticism, some doubt. Well, how is this really going to work? This is the biggest engine that's ever come out here. Is this really going to, were there any doubters at that point?
Oh yeah, I remember KCI, one of our packagers, sold several G3600s to Union Pacific in East Texas, and that company had uh, a record of letting their technicians be involved in some major purchases and so forth. And whenever they had their input, they said, "Well, we're not sure we want that new product because we don't know anything about it." You know, they had some Waukeshaws and they had some old slow speed integrals and so forth. But they kind of voiced that they didn't know about it, so they didn't want that, didn't want to learn on it. And so anyway, management made the decision. They bought, I think there were 7 engines on that site, and we commissioned all of them. We got them all running. And of course, East Texas, all of our DAR territory, I was responsible for. And so I made a visit back after they'd been running several weeks, and I went back over there and I said, "What do you think?" They said, "Well, we still don't know anything about them, but we sure do like them because we don't have to work on them every day." It was kind of
Yeah.
strange, but the fact is that that company, they had 3 techs on site. They had to have that to keep them running, and they reassigned 2 techs after they got the G3600s, and so their time required to maintain uptime was greatly reduced.
Yeah,
With
so the uptime increased tremendously from the previous models, right?
absolutely.
And so, and what was the reason for that?
Well, reliability. The G3600, of course, the first one was an ESS, and it had a control system which was a mixture of a number of different components from other cat products, and it was unproven. Had a lot of wires, a lot of connections, but the reliability of running and maintaining air fuel ratio and emissions and so forth, it was not hard at all to maintain 95, 98% runtime.
Wow.
It turned out that the Achilles heel was all the wiring connections, though. One of the things that we always did on commissioning was go through the wiring system and make sure we tightened every screw terminal and every junction box everywhere. We found a lot of the packagers would use a little pocket screwdriver in doing the interconnect, and they couldn't put enough torque on the screws to maintain the tightness. And so it was standard fare to go tighten all of those. I don't even remember how many count, but it was a lot of them. And we tightened all of those and suggested that at least first 3 months might not be a bad idea to tighten them up a little bit more.
Yeah, just to make sure. And so
Yeah.
how many hours a year were these engines running?
Oh, they run 24/7. So you wind up with maintenance time. You'll approach 8,500 hours, something like that. They run all the time.
Wow. Yeah, and with that uptime and reliability, you can actually do that. So that saves the customer lots of money and time and headaches, right? So they can focus on what their real job is.
Right, right.
Yeah. So then, over the years, you've commissioned over 300 of these. What was the biggest jump in terms of technological improvement that you saw that was the most impressive to you?
Well, it ran on just about any fuel that the customer had to use. It was not hard to get the engine set up. One of the things that I found, it was very important to have some pre-commissioning discussion with the construction crew, so that all of the piping and all of the other support items had the right completion level, so that we didn't have a lot of wait time when we got there. So I never had a lot of issues with commissioning, because I made it a point to always uh, talk to the construction manager, foreman, or whatever, and say, "Now, here's the checklist.
Yeah.
Uh, Whenever you get all of these things done, then we can come do commissioning, and it'll be done in short time, and we'll have a good time."
Now, when they went into the from the ESS to the ADAM A3 update,
Yes,
tell me about that.
that was a big step. I was involved in some of that conversation. We were involved in two G3612 conversions up in the Panhandle, and do some field testing. There was also a G3616 in South Louisiana, but we converted those, and the biggest thing about the A3 was the uh, moving all of the wiring, reducing terminals off the engine. When the engine runs, it has a lot of high frequency energy in it, and that was one of the big things that caused terminal screw loosening, and things, wire chafing, and so forth. And so we actually moved all but about a half a dozen screws terminals off the engine with the A3, so
Wow.
that the wiring issues just were non-existent. I tried to keep track of it a little bit, and I think the first wiring issue I heard about was nearly a year after the engine had been introduced to the field. So we had a lot of A3s running by that time, but it just stopped all of the wiring issues. Now, the strategy of the A3 was almost the same as the ESS. What Cat had found is that we need a little more control of the low load air fuel ratio. So they put a feedback loop on the choke, so we could set a desired exhaust temperature, and the ECM would automatically take care of the air fuel ratio at low load. Whereas before with the ESS, we had a fixed position choke, and the technician set that up during commissioning. And sometimes, if you were going to run at that low load, which was before below 40%, then you had to go back and tweak the choke position. But that was the functional improvement in the operating strategy. But the biggest thing by far was eliminating all the wiring, uh, terminals, and so forth.
Yeah, and the turbo changed as well, right?
Well, that was a big change too mechanically. The old
Yeah.
VTC turbocharger was an axial radial turbo, and the hot turbine end wasn't designed to shed the deposits that built up out of the exhaust stream. And we did well to run 8, 10, maybe 12,000 hours with a VTC, and then you'd have to at least tear it down and clean it to call that a level 1 repair. And we were involved with the turbo change whenever Cat went to the TPS. We had one test turbo in East Texas. We had one in Oklahoma, and those two ran to 30,000 plus hours without any attention. So it was a big step as Cat tried to make the turbo life match top end repair life, and so the TPS does that.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, like anything in life, right? You're only as strong as your weakest link, and
That's
so
right.
that's
That's right.
something that was a big change there. And then emissions come into play in a big way in the industry, and we CAT continues to step up in terms of technology and meeting requirements and so forth.
Right.
You get into the A4 upgrades. So
Yeah.
then, tell me a bit more about that and what happened there.
Well, the A4 again, it's as gas wells are drilled and the product comes to the surface, you deplete the supply, and you're drilling new wells and finding new formations and so forth. And in that course, a lot of new hotter gas, higher BTU gas, uh, is found and put into the production mix. And high BTU gas is a little more sensitive in the combustion process to detonation.
Mm,
And if you have a lot of high BTU gas, then you're going to have a lot of detonation, and detonation runs to downtime. With Cat's detonation sensitive system, if you didn't have that, then you'd have some piston damage and a lot of issues there. So
right.
the A3, while it was reliable and had a very good runtime and everybody happy, it wasn't being a 9-to-1 compression ratio. It wasn't didn't like hot gas, and customers had an opportunity to input the Caterpillar. What do you want to improve on the 3600 gasser? And their number one issue was we need to be able to burn hotter fuel.
Mm,
That was the
interesting.
number one issue because you take a lot of up gas finds in the Northeast and South Texas and other things. The BTU was just way too hot, and so they'd have to run derated, so they couldn't utilize all the horsepower the engine had the capability because they'd run into detonation. So that was the number one issue: run hotter. And of course, the number two issue, as
And
our
was
emission.
that problem in like in particular to Texas or just in
No,
general?
all over. Anywhere the fuel supply became a higher BTU, that was an issue. Not only with G3600, but G3500s and all of them. But
Right.
we're dealing with a G3600 and have to approach that and see what the technology and how can we make that better. And turns out that a uh, more complex combustion strategy comes into play with different compression ratio and different cam profiles, and able to fool the engine and make it think it's a lower compression ratio than it really is. So we were able to, Cat was able to burn much hotter fuel and maintain rated horsepower. And of course, as the A3 came along, we had a horsepower increase across the product line. And A4, again, we had about a 6 to 8% horsepower increase. So, in addition to the horsepower increase, we still had to have had a better challenge to keep detonation from happening.
Interesting. So you've been around these engines for, 40 plus years, 40, 50 years, a lot longer than most people have been married. What what is it about these engines that have kept you so passionate and you stuck with this for so long? Tell me about that.
Well, in my career with the cat dealers, uh, I've always had an opportunity to be a first in a lot of things. First TC, technical communicator.
Nice.
I was always doing projects, testing transmissions. The first half of my career was earth moving, so had a lot of experience in tractors and motor graders and things. So I was always working with Caterpillar Engineering and testing components and even in the field follower program, complete machines, place it at a customer site and see how it works. And it was a win-win situation for the customer, free machine, and for the dealer, we were able to learn about new product quickly, and so that when it was introduced, our field technicians already had some awareness of the new product, and of course, always developed a good relationship with CAD engineering folks, and knew them, talked to them on a daily basis, and as the old saying, broke bread with a lot of them, and became friends with a lot of them still today.
Yeah, you've had an amazing career, with the cat dealers and that whole family relationship with Caterpillar, and it is impressive that you've stayed with it for so long, especially with one category and one line, because that really represents legacy and continuity and loyalty. That those are kind of words that describe the relationship between cat dealers and their customers, right? It's
Right,
long
right.
standing, we're going to be here by your side type relationships, and deep knowledge, which is another thing that you don't see too often anymore. People staying with one company or with one industry, one product line for so many years. So congratulations to that on your
Thank
tremendous
you.
career. And as we celebrate the 30th anniversary of this great piece of technology with the G3600, it has helped so many customers and folks out there. So any final words about G3600 or your time with Cat and the dealers as we wrap
Well,
up?
well, I have always been involved in problem solving, even though I had a lot of different uh, titles and jobs. But it seemed like engine and gas engine, particularly products, came to me. And so I've always been involved in sharing information with technicians, both at the dealer level and the customer level. And as time goes on, you learn more. Always at DAR, we always had a policy as the G3600 began to show up, that we gave some training to the customer when he got his first engine as a part of support for the packager and part of support from the dealer, because a lot of engines went somewhere else, not in our territory, not in our packager's territory.
Mm.
And so I became acquainted with a lot of dealers and dealer people in Wyoming and Colorado and New Mexico and wherever they went, because those dealers didn't have an opportunity to sell engines and they didn't have an opportunity to learn about them. So training has always been a partner in my commissioning exercises. So with that in mind, that's why I get even today. I get a lot of phone calls and emails. Facebook has a couple of websites that have technicians asking questions and so forth, and so I'm on that, monitor those questions and sometimes have input. Bobby Runnels, which is kind of my partner here in longevity, he's on that sometimes too. And so we like to share information with our technicians. Life's tough enough without making it harder. So we like to make it easier for them and help them to understand the right way to use the literature and what training they need and so forth. And when they're successful, the cat product's going to be successful. and we're going to stay ahead of the pack.
Well, you've got the heart of a trainer, teacher, and leader, my friend. So thank you so much for your time. We couldn't have done it without you all these years with the 3600. So you're a big part of that life.
Well, you think you're indispensable, but think about this. When you think you're indispensable, just get your bucket of water and stick your fist down in it, and then pull it out and see how long it takes to fill in the space where your fist was.
There you go.
It's fun to be a part of things and so forth, but life moves on, and so we just do what we do.
Fantastic. Thank you, Al. Appreciate you being on.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow and rate us, and be sure to share it with a friend so that you can power up their life and their career.